Why are you hiding? Why are you hiding, you little That's right, run! Run, you little
So what this TikToker by the name of Trinity Ann experienced is something that happens every day in America. And it underscores this terrifying reality that fundamentally in the United States, women face an extreme amount of violence every single day. And the most terrifying reality behind all of this is the fact that a lot of the institutions that are theoretically supposed to protect people fundamentally aren't when it comes to a situation like this. Very often, women who face things like this, women who face arbitrary, random violence from random people in the streets, are often told that they're being overreactive. And very often, when they go to people in positions of power and say that different people victimize them in one way or another, they very often are told that they're overreacting or there's not enough evidence and we can't investigate this for whatever reason. And it leads to this problem where there's this systemic violence that exists against women. And there's this baseline fear that a lot of women face about men generally in society. Except for, instead of actually focusing on the behaviors of men in society and questioning, how are we raising men, right? How are people growing up? In what environments is this? And what are the cultural norms that are leading to this? Very often people's response is to focus on how women can defend themselves. And while sure, that might be useful in the instance of this, why is that our entire focus? Why can't maybe we focus on the reality that maybe it's actually bad that this is something that is happening in our society? Because it doesn't happen everywhere. Believe it or not, there are actually societies where this high level of violence against women isn't normal, right? Like, certainly there's going to be some violence that happens in any society. We do live in a society, as they say. But the degree to which it happens in the United States is reflective of the environment that both promotes this very toxic sort of frat boy culture and actually provides very little when it comes to supporting women when they're victimized in this way. And another terrifying component of this is how things like this are so normalized. I mean, let's take this in the context of online spaces. If somebody's a woman online, odds are at some point they've had to face creepy online stalkers, tons of random harassment from strangers, especially if they're on places like Twitter, and sometimes they'll get even people who will unsolicited send them inappropriate pictures without their consent. And this often is tagged along with things like death threats and other things like that. And if you look at the platforms and their response to this happening, very often it's very little. It's already pretty rare that people get banned for things like this, and if they do, that's usually where it ends, and it's very easy for a lot of these people to create different accounts and continue to harass people. And then especially when you look at the instances of threats, things that are, to be clear, crimes. You can't just send people violent threats. The response to that is basically non-existent. I mean, seriously, if you get a random threat online and you bring that to law enforcement, odds are they're gonna either laugh at you, tell you that they can't investigate it, or just straight up tell you that they won't investigate it, which creates an environment that is unfortunately very welcome to sexual harassment and sexual assault. And it ties into this larger trend because very often a lot of people who are willing to commit random acts of violence against women, or who are willing to threaten violence against women on the internet, also very often end up being the same types of people that do things like commit mass shootings. Which is why it's so weird that there's not a bigger effort to actually do things like investigate people who are sending threats online. But that's reflective of the reality on the ground, where a lot of people who are harassing and assaulting people like this in the streets aren't really getting much done to them in response. That there's not really anything in the way of accountability in this regard for the systems that are fundamentally failing to respond to gendered violence. It seems pretty clear to me that if we as a society actually cared to take this problem seriously, that if we as a society took care to respond to the threats of violence and the stalking and the harassment that exists within online spaces, that would bleed over into real life spaces and hopefully make people a bit safer, especially because there's a person on the other side of that computer that is saying all of those hateful, monstrous, and violent things, and that maybe if we had some sort of follow-up on those people and investigated their behavior, that perhaps, if there were repercussions, those people would either A, be facing consequences for the actions and hopefully be rehabilitated in some way, or B, feel as though that their behavior is unwelcome and maybe think about themselves for a second and change their behavior. But without doing that, unfortunately, we have this culture of online misogyny that is paired with a culture of in real life misogyny that is creating a pretty toxic environment for women wherever they are.